Hi, I'm Trish from TrishNewbery.com, PDF Sewing Patterns, and you are now watching the sew-along video for the Echo Longline sweater. So this is a winter jumper with a centre front split. It's designed for knit fabric, so you want something medium weight winter knit. French terry would be fine, a sweatshirting, a sweater knit. Today I am sewing with, it's a cotton blend. It's almost like a rugby knit. I just saw it and I really liked it. So it's a sweater knit. Here we are. To sew this garment you're going to need a serger, or you can watch or read my video or the tutorial blog on how to use a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine, the lightning bolt, if you want to do it that way. But today I'm going to sew this on my serger overlocker. You'll need 4 threads of colour that match your fabric. I have set the seam allowances to 6 mil, 1/4 of an inch, so make sure your stitch width is set to that. Do a test stitch on spare fabric before you start. Make sure you have fresh needles in the machine. Now we are going to need to do some hemming. So with the hemming you could either use a cover stitch machine, or you could use a twin needle in your plain sewing machine. You could just use a single stitch in your plain sewing machine, but just make sure you have a ball needle so that we don't cut any of the threads while we're sewing, which would create a ladder. We're not going to cut off any fabric when we sew, so just use your cutting blade on your machine just to tidy up any fraying or stray threads. Okay, so let's get started with the back. Take your lower back and locate the center notch. Then take your upper back and not the neck edge, the curve edge, but the other edge, the lower edge, you'll find a notch as well. So right sides together, we're going to match those two pieces. And now we're going to sew a seam from one side to the other, making sure that center notch matches. Now place the back right side up and take one of the front pieces and place it right side down so we have right sides together. And we're going to sew this seam here, which is, it looks like a shoulder seam, but it's actually the front yoke seam. So it'll look a bit strange, but it's absolutely correct. See how here's our armhole here at the back and here's the armhole at the front. So it's absolutely correct. So stitch it on one side together and then the other. Okay, so go to your iron and give them a press, and we want the seams to all face towards the back. So the front seam needs to be pushed that way, and that back yoke seam needs to be pushed down towards the hem. Now let's sew in the sleeves. So we have a pair of sleeves which some people call 2 mirrors. There's been one cut out like this and one cut out like this. At the very center of the top there's a notch, so pop a pin in the crown notch, and on one side of the sleeves you'll see another notch. So pop a pin there so you can see it. The side with the notch is the back of the sleeve. So what we're going to do is take your garment and open up your garment like this. So what I've got is the front at the front and the back at the back, and it's right side up, and just down from that front yoke seam you'll see a notch. So just mark that notch in place. That notch is going to match to the crown notch on our sleeve. So pop those pieces together, right sides together, matching that centre notch, and the notch at the back of the sleeve will match to that back yoke seam there. Now you will have to slightly ease this sleeve into fit, which basically just means stretch it to fit from one side to the other. So what we're going to do is just start off here at the side seam, sew a little way, and then rearrange your work, and then just gently ease that to fit all the way to the top. And then same thing again, we want to ease this amount here in until we get to the back yoke and all the way back to the side seam. Then we'll repeat that on the other side. Try and keep most of the ease towards the centre top of the sleeve. Don't put much stretch at the bottom of the arm if you can possibly help it. There's not a huge amount to ease in, just see how you go. And it will also depend on how stretchy your fabric is. This fabric is really stretchy. We're now going to sew the centre front, so come to the centre front, and that's this long straight seam here. Part way down you will see a notch here. But what I'd like you to do is overlock both sides of the front, the straight edge. I'm going to do mine right side up because I think the stitching looks nicer like that. Come to your plain sewer and make sure you have a ball needle, and we're going to sew part way down the centre front seams, so the ones you've just overlock serged together. So match your centre front seams right sides together at the neck edge. So here is the seam we've just serged together, and here is the neck edge up here. Now part way down you will see a notch, and you should be able to see it through your overlocking on both sides. Around about here. Okie dokie. Right. So we are now going to sew from the neck down towards that notch position, and we're sewing at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so stop directly opposite the notch point and back tack. Right, so go to your iron, and we want to press that seam we've just sewn open like that, but I want you to continue pressing each side of that at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, all the way down to the hemline. So when you've pressed, this is what we're looking for, a continuation of this all the way down. Now we have to stitch that to maintain the opening. So you've got a couple of options here. You can stitch through with your needle. So if you wanted to do that, stitch 5mm, just under 1/4 of an inch from either side of the seam. You could do 2 rows of top stitching there. You could twin needle that into position, and we're doing this from the neck all the way to the hem, or you could use your cover seamer if you like that look. So I'm going to go and use my cover stitcher, but you just choose whichever method is right from you. And yes, top stitch from the neck all the way down to the hem. Right, so I'm going to use my cover stitch, and I've done some test stitches. I just like to use a leader. Right, so I'm going to cover stitch this down from the hem to the neckline on both sides. You could do it the other way around, whatever you prefer. So for the other side, because I'm sewing from the neck down, I've just had to feed the garment through. In hindsight, I should probably have done this before. I'm just going to test stitch. Piece that sewing nicely, and I'll just continue. Okay, so go and give that seam another press before we continue. Let's sew the collar. So this is our roll collar piece. Now it's a loose roll, not quite a cowl, but it is a rectangle. So take your rectangle and fold it together so that the short ends match, and you will have notches on the fold, top and bottom, and then a notch part way along. And just overlock serge those edges together. And then place your hand inside and just turn it back on itself. So we have right side out, wrong sides together. And then just match those seams and match and join the notch positions. Take your garment and come to the neckline area, and we're going to locate all the notches that we're going to use to sew the collar on. So the front's at the front, the back's at the back, and this is right side out. So what we need to find is the notch at the centre back neck, and that's going to sew to the seam on our collar. Then as we come along the side, there's 2 notches, and that's going to match to the notches on our collar, and then the seam at the centre front is going to match to the notch at the centre front, which will be directly opposite the seam. So let's just put this into practice. Turn the front so it is wrong side out, and make sure the front's at the front and the back's at the back, like this. Then take this collar that you've just sewn and place it inside. Then match the seam on the collar to that centre back notch. Come directly opposite and match that notch to the seam at the front of the garment, and then you'll have 2 notches left in between, and they'll match here. Now this collar has stretch, has ease allowed for, so we're going to gently stretch the collar in to fit the garment. And we want to make sure those positions are where we put the stretch. So sew these layers together. I'm going to start not from the back, I'm going to start from one of the shoulder notches. If you just sew a couple of stitches to anchor that into place, it just sort of works like another pair of hands. Now we're working on the side seam and the underarm all at once. So come to the wrist area and place this right sides together. And we're going to sew up from the wrist through to the hemline. There's notches to match as you go. When you're finished on one side, go ahead and repeat that on the other. So now we're going to work on the hems. The seam allowance for the body hem is 5 centimetres, 2 inches, and the seam allowance for the sleeve hem is 2.5 centimetres, 1 inch. So what you need to do now is go to your iron and press a seam into place like so, and it's probably a good idea to try this on before you finalise anything. So just to help you out, there's a notch at the turn position here. Here is my body hem pressed up. As you can tell, it's a chunky hem, it's deep. That's to help with the fall at the front, but you can make that smaller if you want. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm using my cover stitcher, I'm going to tuck those stray threads inside, and I'm going to stitch from the right side of my work, just following the guides on my machine. Okay, so I'm using a narrow stitch, and I'm using my middle and my right needles. So go and repress that and then stitch the sleeve hems. Now I'm going to sew the sleeve hem. Okay, so go ahead and repeat the hem on the other sleeve, and then do some quality control work. So for me, that means trimming off stray threads. I'm going to trim some of this seaming back as well, just to make it look all pretty. And then you'll give your garment a final press, and you're finished. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy this garment. I totally love wearing this. So easy to throw on with ponte pants and even just like a winter merino singlet underneath. Easy for layering, just love it. So thanks for joining me, thanks for buying my patterns, and if you like what you see, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to join my Facebook group, the link's in the description below. Hope to see you again soon.